While we as horror fans are used to the brutal nature of horror games and somewhat got insensitive about their disturbing imagery and themes, that's usually not the case for the average person. And by average person, I mean people that are not into horror much, or people that only follow and consume the popular horror media, be it video games, movies, TV series, etc. But even for us die-hard horror fans, there are some lines that you hesitate to cross. You think twice before crossing. Some imagery that pushes even you to your limits. You, who is insensitive to all horror material. These themes could be about the hurting of an animal, or torturing a child, losing a loved one in a painful way. There are more of these, but you probably understand what I mean. Fears of sentimental levels. Not about the imagery per se, but the idea it relays on your mind. While these days we don't really see game developers being as brave as some games were back in the day, some indie developers still try to tell us brutal stories with some pretty grotesque imagery. Unfortunately, this idea of going beyond the limits or crossing the conventional lines is usually tied to the amount of gore, chopped heads, murdering people, you know what I mean, all that jazz. But it's really not about that at all. And it's hard to explain this to the average person because these days, if you want to sell a horror game, you need to put some shock value in it. And gore elements are probably the easiest way to create shock value and the buzz for your game. But for the insensitive horror people, they don't really mean much without any meaningful substance, anything sentimental. It's hard to explain, I know, so let's not hang around too much and get into the actual reason why we're here. Hello everybody, my name is Hürcan and welcome to this new horror visuals video. Today we are going to talk about Rule of Rose, a survival horror game from the PlayStation 2 era. Considered as one of the cult classics of this subgenre, it's unfortunately pretty hard to come by these days. It's a rare video game and it's usually sold by scalpers with ridiculously high prices. So the only reasonable way to play it is, of course, just as I said in my last video about Kuon, to emulate it using a PlayStation 2 emulator. And just as a disclaimer, because I forgot to record them separately, this video is going to have footage from my Twitch stream where I streamed Rule of Rose, and you're gonna have to see my silly, annoying little face in the corner sometimes. I will try to keep it there as less as possible. My apologies. Rule of Rose is a game known for its brutality. It wasn't afraid of crossing some really strict conventional lines, and because of that, it even got banned in some countries whenever it first came out. One wonders if it were to re-release today, would it get banned again, considering the drastic change in gaming? Not only the horror people, but gamers in general are insensitive to most stuff these days. But as with many things, these conventional lines are still there in gaming too. Obviously, I'm talking about the elephant in the room, the one thing that you see a lot in Rule of Rose. This game doesn't hesitate to show some grotesque imagery involving children. Physical abuse, emotional abuse, harassment. It has everything, and all of these themes involve children in some shape or form. Sometimes children do these foul things to one another, sometimes adults, and sometimes even the player, us, we get to physically hurt children in this game. This is something you don't really see too much in the gaming scene, for good reason too. It's not an easy subject to use in a game, and it for sure brings a lot of baggage and criticism with it. Rule of Rose takes place in 1930s and it tells the story of Jennifer, our protagonist. The game refers to her as the unlucky girl, and it makes sense because she is indeed pretty unlucky. The plot and the events that take place during the game's course usually don't make sense, and for good reason, because Jennifer also has no idea why she is here, what is she doing, and why do these children keep talking about Jennifer being a bad girl. Apparently she did something and they all hate her for that. Obviously, the game doesn't really tell any of these plot secrets until very later in the game, and in Jennifer's confusion, you somewhat find solace, because it's not just you that don't understand what's happening. Jennifer is as confused as you are. The game begins as Jennifer gets off a bus and finds herself on the side road in front of an old orphanage. The game doesn't really give much backstory about why she is there specifically. Without thinking too deep into it, you take control of Jennifer and make your way into the orphanage. Shortly after, certain events take place and Jennifer wakes up all tied up inside a massive airship. It sounds bizarre, I know. It also looks bizarre, believe me, I know. It's clear that this is some kind of a dream, or rather a nightmare. After waking up, Jennifer starts getting directions from the members of the Aristocrats Club, or the Aristocrats of the Red Crayon. It's a secret society of children. They run things around here. In her first moments in the airship, she slowly gets to meet all of these children, and the game refers to them as princes and the princesses. There's clearly a hierarchy in this secret society of theirs, and according to your social status, people's behavior against you change. They either like you, use you, abuse you, or simply hate you. And they don't really like Jennifer much. As you explore the surroundings, you get to meet these characters, and the fact that they all have different qualities, appearances, quirks, and values is something to be appreciated, because the game has a lot of these characters and they all have some sort of importance to the story. In some shape or form, they all have an effect on Jennifer's survival in this hellscape. The game in general has this fairy tale feeling to it. Princes, princesses, the unlucky girl, a narrator, a talking broom slash scarecrow kind of thing that also serves as a save point, a trash bin who also talks and serves as an item box. The game has all these things that merge and create this dreamlike scenario. Throughout the whole game, you know for sure you must be in a terrible, terrible nightmare. None of this can be real. Right? The main gameplay loop also revolves around this club. In each chapter, the Aristocrats Club asks for a gift from their members. Those who bring this gift are granted entry into the club. Those who cannot get demoted and physically abused. While looking for the first gift, Jennifer finds a trusty companion, one that will never leave her side throughout the whole game. It's Brown. Brown is a dog. Much like Huey from Haunting Ground, he has a pretty crucial role in Rule of Rose's gameplay and story. Brown has a pretty interesting, innovative, and useful gameplay purpose. He does what a dog does best and finds things for you. He doesn't really fight, other than stunning enemies occasionally for a few seconds. His actual, real purpose is to find things. The game has a find mechanic. When you pick up an item, you can go to your inventory, select that item, and then select the find option. Once you do that, whenever you press triangle, Jennifer commands Brown to smell the object and find something related to it. This could be an item required to advance the story, or it could simply be an item to restore your health, or something totally optional. This is a pretty detailed mechanic, and for its time, it's actually pretty innovative too. Thanks to Brown and his pathfinding capabilities, you never lose track of your objective and easily find your way around the airship. But of course, sometimes the paths Brown chooses might be blocked, and in those situations you will have to use your own pathfinding skills, check your map, and find your own way. As the main threat in the game, you're gonna control Jennifer while she survives against malformed, demonic little children. They only start to show up sometimes, usually towards the end of a chapter, and they're pretty dangerous. This danger comes from their volatile behavior. They throw themselves around, jump on you, hold you, stab you, beat you with sticks. They're pretty dangerous. And because Jennifer, by her nature, is frail and she doesn't really know how to defend herself, if they surround you in numbers, you could lose pretty quickly and see the game over screen in short succession. Most of the time you will want to run away from them instead of fighting, because if they are in high numbers and they surround you in a narrow corridor, which the game has plenty of, they will keep stunning you and kill you at the end. So whenever you can, try to run. If you cannot run, then wait for an opening and run. Just run, like make sure you run. Not only these small malformed children, but you also fight against adults sometimes. They're usually encountered in the shape of boss fights, and they can be pretty challenging too. They hit hard, they stun like Jennifer sometimes, and could create pretty frustrating combat situations. Speaking of frustration, let's talk about the other elephant in the room. The one thing people always mention whenever there is discourse about Rule of Rose: the combat. It's not good. It makes sense, it really does, but from a gameplay perspective, it's pretty bad. Jennifer is really hard to control in combat situations. She's slow, frail, and in order to hit an enemy, she has to aim at them precisely. Otherwise, the attack goes through them and they attack you instead, resulting in Jennifer probably falling down to the floor, driving you insane. But there is also something to consider here, and this is a subjective opinion. Whenever Rule of Rose first came out, it got pretty mediocre scores, and one of its biggest criticism points was its gameplay. Its combat, to be specific. And because people cannot play the game today, they usually remember that same discourse. The game has bad combat, and that's it. But if you ask me, and this is somewhat like a general thought I have about video games, we were simply worse at playing video games those days. Or rather, we are better at playing video games these days. We're better at understanding controls, controlling characters. We're used to intricate combat mechanics. We're simply better and advanced. Rule of Rose still has frustratingly slow combat mechanics, but I just cannot see it as that bad like those reviews said back in the day. It's the same case as when I post about Rule of Rose on Horror Visuals. People are always like, oh, it's a great game, but it's a shame it has such a bad combat gameplay. And in those situations, I'm like, is that how you think, or is that how you remember it? Because I'm pretty sure if you were to play Rule of Rose today, you wouldn't really have that much trouble playing it. Sure, it would still be frustrating, but you wouldn't really label the gameplay as bad. Because, as I briefly said before, it makes sense. Jennifer is a young girl that does not know how to properly defend herself, how to fight, how to endure pain. She doesn't know any of this. The fact that the game gives you an opportunity to defend yourself and fight against enemies is a miracle actually, because contextually speaking, Jennifer shouldn't be able to swing a steel pipe. But alas, she does, and when you consider this context and take it with a grain of salt, the game's combat mechanics start to look pretty decent. They're not that bad. Besides, combat is just a small part of the game. As I've said, if you mostly try to run away from your enemies, you get plenty of time to appreciate the game's aesthetics, its art design, visuals, its incredible soundtrack. Oh my god, that soundtrack. These all merge and turn Rule of Rose into this timeless, artistic, gothic achievement. It has a gothic art style merged with fairy tale-ish aesthetics, creating something quite unique that we don't really see these days. The clever usage of film grain paired with amazing character and environment designs really creates something to appreciate here. When you consider that this game was released on PlayStation 2, its visual quality really shines. Even by today's standards, thanks to its distinct art style, it may still be considered as a great looking game. If they were to re-release it somehow, someday, I hope that happens, they don't even have to improve anything except the usual high resolution improvements. Just make the game 4K and that's it. That visual quality, paired with the original soundtrack of the game, Rule of Rose is a great time. Its soundtrack, by the way, is actually on Spotify and probably other music platforms under SIE Sound Team, which is, I think, Sony Interactive Entertainment or something, which is also responsible for Bloodborne, basically. I was listening to it while writing this script for this video, actually, and I thought to myself, wow, this could actually be one of the most underrated pieces of media ever. And I really think that. I wish I could share some of it on this video, but unfortunately, you know the rules. The DMCA laws are trash, and I really don't want to deal with any of that. But anyway, coming to my closing remarks. Rule of Rose is a brutal game. It's brutally beautiful, or beautifully brutal. It's hard to explain why is that by simple words, because it's a game one has to experience or at least see for themselves. And maybe we're too late to experience it too, because as I've said at the very beginning of this video, we are insensitive to brutal themes these days. We're not really paced by violence. Video games have turned most of us into insensitive people when it comes to violence or gore or other heavy themes. But amongst all of these, Rule of Rose still manages to creep you out and move at least something inside you. When you see a group of malformed children beating a rabbit in a bloody sack, using their broomsticks, mercilessly chanting otherworldly things, you cannot help yourself but to get creeped out by it. Or again, whenever those same children group up and beat the living hell out of an old lady, dragging her lifeless corpse around the place. Or how they tie up and drive this old man insane, forcing him to fight you, only to be killed at the end. Things like these, sure, they aren't as impactful as whenever it first came out, but they still manage to cringe you out a bit. This alone makes Rule of Rose a special game. Because I personally, I'm insensitive to all kinds of video game violence these days. But Rule of Rose manages to move something inside me. It affects me in a very sentimental way. Oh man, I thought too much. Well, I hope I was able to briefly touch upon why Rule of Rose is a special game for me and why you should give it a try if you ever find the chance. As I've said, it's impossible to obtain the game through reasonable methods, so you will have to find it through quote-unquote other means and try it out. As always, thank you for watching and thank you for being here. Remember to subscribe, like the video, all that jazz. I'm trying to be more efficient and quicker with my video uploads, and believe me, I'm doing my best. Doing this after a long day of work while also trying to run the Horror Visual accounts is a bit challenging, but I have more videos planned. As you have seen, I don't really do regular review videos, but rather I try to talk about a specific aspect of the game and also try to inform you about its mechanics. My upcoming video will start off a small series that I want to pursue. I'm gonna keep it as a secret for now, but it's quite exciting and I believe it's gonna be pretty unique subject, and I also believe that you're gonna like it. I also plan on making videos for games other than horror, sort of like small reviews, or again talking about games from other genres in the same format. I hope you will like them and enjoy watching them too. I will leave my links in the description below. It's also going to have a PayPal link if you like what I'm doing and you'd like to help me get myself something nice for this Christmas. Probably more indie horror games, who am I kidding? Feel free to check that link out and other socials, because Twitter is going to places these days. I have a Tumblr, I have an Instagram, we have a Discord server, which is full of great people, chill people. It's a chill place. Come check that out. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.